Hi, everybody. We'll just give it a couple of minutes to let a few people join. But as you'll see through this, there's a couple of functions. We've got a Q&A function. If you want to ask any questions, and a chat function. So while we wait for a few people to join, it'd be great to hear where you guys are all from at the moment. Right, should we get going then, Anastasia?
Yes, let's get started.
Perfect. So thank you for joining us today for the webinar. We're going to be exploring the importance of effective communications to enable and enhance gender equity using International Women's Day and International Women's Month as your vehicle to elevate your presence. But before we start, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Danny Brace, I'm MD of Havas People, and I've been in the industry for well over 2 decades. And during that time, I've seen a lot of change, not only in the priorities of employers, but the impact that effective communication has on any employer's success. I oversee all of our offices in the UK and around the world, including New York, Chicago, Mumbai, and Sydney.
And I'm Anastasia Pavlova. I'm a strategy director at Havas People. And in my previous experience, I worked with consumer brands, and it taught me to think about the perspectives of the audience. So the question I always ask myself is, what's the people problem behind the business problem? And I can see that employer brands can really benefit from borrowing that approach and to focus more on understanding what matters to their audiences and to use insights to create really powerful ideas for effective communications.
And we all know that effective communication is the cornerstone of successful relationships, either personal or professional. And it's through effective communications that we can share ideas, solve problems, and build strong connections with our intended audiences. In today's fast-paced world, the ability to communicate clearly and effectively is more important than ever before. So our goal for the webinar is to explore the various aspects of communication, be that verbal, non-verbal, and we're going to discuss practical strategies and techniques that you can apply in your daily interactions to enhance the communication skills. But first off, as many of you will recognise, the UN observes International Women's Day annually. It's not just a day of celebration, but a powerful platform for communications. It provides an opportunity to share stories, raise awareness, and advocate for gender equity and the issues that affect women. But it does need to be done right, and I'm going to argue that many organisations don't build it into their overarching equity strategy, but view it as a campaign opportunity. The insight that we've done, and Anastasia is going to talk through, explores what women's looking for from organisations to enable you to provide you with some communication suggestions for the work that you're doing. And of course, this year's international theme, Women's Day theme, is looking at accelerating action. And in the US, the focus on Women's History Month is about moving forward together. And at Havas People, we understand the significance of leveraging this global occasion to not only raise awareness of gender inequity in the workplace, but also to champion gender equity within your own organisation. And this is why we've developed the webinar on how to authentically and meaningfully engage with International Women's Day and International Women's Month as part of your employer branding strategy. We're going to cover areas such as the importance of engaging with the movements. We're looking at audience insight for effective communications. We'll look at inspiring examples from employer comms world and outside of it. And then we're going to end with some guiding principles for impactful campaigns that we hope will inspire and equip you to go beyond surface level acknowledgement of the day. We've based our recommendations on desk research and insights from our own proprietary surveys conducted in 2023 and 2024. And we spoke to a sample of 785 employed women across the UK, the US, and the Netherlands, with the aim to understand women's views on the workplace experiences and issues that are affecting them, as well as the topics and the challenges that they wished employers would speak more about. It is important to say that the research was conducted before the US election, and we both recognise the uncertain situation in the market that many businesses find themselves in today. But we hope that you'll see as we go through the insight that it remains relevant, and the guiding principles at the end that we will discuss can be dialed up and dialed down depending on the decisions being taken by your organisations and the communication strategies we would need to deploy.
Thanks for the introduction, Danny. Now, let's dive in. So the first kind of obvious question is, why engage with the International Women's Day and Women's History Month? Now, according to the World Economic Forum, it will take 134 years for the world to reach full gender parity if it goes at the current rate of progress. Now, to add to that, another trivia fact is that 134 years is actually longer than the time that has passed since the first International Women's Day was held. So the world might have come a long way since then, but there is still a longer way to go. And when we asked our survey respondents to make their best guess at how long it would take, actually 90% of them severely underestimated how much work there is still to be done. And when we shared with them the World Economic Forum's projection, they refused to believe it. And some of the reactions that we can see on screen are quite incredulous because they felt that it simply can't be true because from their observations, many things have changed for women, especially in the last few years, and it felt like progress has accelerated. But it's sad to admit that actually we, as in our industry, have really contributed to these perceptions, because there have been a lot of conversations, a lot of content from businesses and organizations around empowering women. And typical communications that we see around the International Women's Day would show quite like polished images and sanitized stories of successful women, very typified, which creates an impression that empowering women is the solution to a much bigger problem. But gender inequity is a problem that empowering women alone cannot solve. We have asked women taking our survey if they have experienced gender-based discrimination or biases in their workplaces. And the responses we have got were very unsettling. So things like it's not worth promoting women because they get pregnant and it's a headache, that's what they could hear in their workplace. Or you can't discuss menstruation because men in the office might get offended. So some of these responses, like we found them hard to believe because it felt like they are the relic of the past. It's not something that can be happening right now. However, the data from McKinsey studies confirm that despite there have been really notable gains in representation of women in different roles across different seniorities, women's experiences in the workplace have not really drastically improved over the last 10 years. So as we can see, the 2024 study showed that half of women experience competence-based microaggressions, and 40% of women had their judgment questioned in the area of expertise. And 40% were interrupted or spoken over more than others. So our findings, as well as the industry sources, bring us to a conclusion that organizations really need to go beyond empowering and celebrating. And women want to be listened to, they want their concerns to be heard, and they want to see action rather than promises. So they really want to see what companies are doing, and they want to know the outcomes. So this year, as Dani has already mentioned, the theme of the International Women's Day is Accelerate Action. And it's a good time to show what action your organization is taking to accelerate gender equity. And again, this quote from one of our participants really sums up it quite well. And something I'd like to note is that sometimes gender equity seems to be interpreted as a competition. So it's women against men. But gender equity is not a women's issue. It's critical for a healthy society and economic prosperity. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like one group wins, another loses. Because just think about this, and again, I'm stating the obvious that women make half of the population, and half of the population that finds itself in a disadvantaged position and facing systemic barriers for many historical reasons. But disadvantaging half of the population affects the other half as well. And the whole society is affected by stereotypes, prejudice, and systemic imbalances that hold women back. And when people, regardless of their gender, are pushed into rigidly defined roles that don't suit them, then no one wins. And something that we noticed has already started last year is that more men were invited and were getting involved in the discussions, in the panels and activities around the International Women's Day. And what this really is about is a call to allyship. And because gender equity is everyone's business and it's a win for everyone, women and men. Therefore, it's critical that everyone is included in conversations and understands why gender equity is important and also has the tools to become part of the solution. So we strongly believe that International Women's Day is an opportunity to make an impact and to strengthen an employer reputation. And taking a stand on what you believe in has a massive potential to make an impact far beyond the day, inside and outside of an organization. And a meaningful campaign would strengthen credibility and build trust and create pride among the employees. But it really needs to be planned well, really thoughtfully and considerately and sensitively to the audiences, with the awareness on the context in which your organization operates, and also attuned to the needs and frustrations of the audiences that you want to connect with. Which brings me to the next section, where I would like to take you through our research findings on what do women want employers to talk about more, and how these insights can help you connect with the female audiences. We have distilled these findings into 4 considerations that can help guide the content and the tone of voice when developing employer communications. And some of the slides are quite data heavy, but I will be talking through the key highlights, and we'll share the deck after the webinar, so you can dive into the details should you wish to look at it at the data closer. So the first consideration is getting the basics right. And what we see is women really want to hear about the fundamentals. And they want to see what employers are doing about equal pay, work-life balance, and flexible and hybrid working. And these are the most tangible indicators that show women that an organization takes equality of opportunities seriously, because these are the systemic barriers that they can help fix. So, for example, various studies show that women are less likely to ask for a raise or a promotion, and are less likely to be successful even if they do. And also, it's a fact that women are more likely to have caregiver responsibilities. And so flexible working patterns allow to accommodate their schedules and give them a chance to do their best work. So if an organization shows how they're planning to close their gender pay gap, or demonstrates that they're increasing support for work-life balance or offer flexible working conditions. So these are the really strong proof points that build credibility and trust, and much more convincingly than pledging some abstract commitments to gender equity initiatives. Now, next one is about the communication styles. So we asked women what tone they would prefer their company to use when communicating around the International Women's Day, and particularly around the theme of accelerate action. And what we see is women do want companies to acknowledge and celebrate women's achievements, but equally, they want transparency and authenticity. So they don't want sugarcoating, they want honesty and empathy. And they also want companies to encourage and foster collective effort. So they want communications to encourage collaboration, so for everyone to come together in solving the gender equity issues. And it's also interesting to know that the bold and challenging tone came up last on the preferred list of our respondents, but that does not indicate that women don't want systemic change. So what this indicates is women don't want big words, but little action. So they really want companies to make the change, to be the change, not just shout about it. Which brings us to the next point. So what are the themes that women want employers to highlight more? And women want honesty above all. So they do want to see women in leadership roles, but they also want to hear honest accounts of what it took to get there. And women want organizations to be transparent about their goals, actions, and also challenges on their gender equity journey. And there is a strong call for allyship. So women believe they want to engage men in the discussions, and also they ask companies to give all employees the tools that they could use in their everyday work so that everyone could really contribute to making workplaces more equitable. And we also asked what kinds of stories women would like employers to feature. And we can see that they want stories that show that companies understand and appreciate women in all roles and seniority levels. And also they acknowledge the variety and complexity of their experiences at work and in life. So they want to see women in unusual careers, results and impact that women made, and also their career journeys and the challenges that they had to overcome. And again, this quote sums it up really well, that women want companies to highlight the real experiences of women that are relatable to them, and not just show, make the right noise on the right days. And the final consideration in this section of insights, summing up our research findings, is about the gaps. And here we're talking about the gaps between intention and action, or the say-do gaps that we need to be mindful of. So the first one is about the efforts versus expectations. So the effort that senior leadership is seen to be making versus expectations that women have. And while our data shows that women tend to be mostly positive about senior leadership in their companies, so they see them taking steps to support women and accelerate action towards gender equity. However, most respondents pointed out that this effort that they see is medium well at best, so there is still much more that needs to be done. And another area where we found inconsistency between declared attitudes and the intention to act is the considerations about non-binary people and transgender women. So while the majority of respondents agree that they should be more involved in the discussions and events around the International Women's Day, only a small minority feel that the use of gender-inclusive language, such as pronouns, for example, is important to include in communications. So this is quite a telling example that highlights how good intentions may be disconnected from actual behaviors, perhaps potentially because of lack of understanding why it is important. So this is a kind of gap where intentional and consistent use of gender-inclusive language in communications can really help the audiences to become familiar and make it a new norm that simply won't be questioned. So to recap, the 4 principles or the 4 considerations that we suggest to keep in mind to get the basics right, to have an inspirational celebration and transparent tone in your communications, to highlight honest stories and engage men and encourage allyship, and to mind the gaps between the intention and reality. Coming on to the next section that we'd like to talk about is, this is where we want to look at some of the best examples, in our opinion, of brand and communications campaigns that shed light on the issues that affect women in the workplace and in the society. So for this section, we have purposefully chosen to look outside of our own work. And this is not to say that we've got nothing to show. So Danny and I just spoke before we started that our recent campaign for IWD that is called Power Looks Good on You. It features women in the energy industry and their stories in their own words. And it's a really, really lovely work. And I think I'm allowed to say that because I didn't work on it. So I just really admire the team's work. But on a serious note, we really wanted to find some inspiration in the employer communications and outside of it, of the employer world. So let's take a look at some brands and companies who have done some really, truly outstanding work and talk about what makes it great and what we can learn from them. So the first one up is Lego. So they've done a campaign around the International Women's Day that's focused on the lack of women in engineering and product design. And why we love this is because Lego is a brand that is built around the joy of play. And this campaign really taps into that. So while it is aiming to address a really serious issue, so the lack of women in technology roles, the campaign it makes a playful take on it, which is really in line with Lego brand. So the campaign video shows Lego's designers talking about how they first discovered design when they were children, and how creativity and play is now part of their job. So it's very ownable. It's unmistakably Lego, but it also shows an interesting, really engaging perspective on the issue that we all have heard so much about, and I'm sure we've done campaigns in that space. So we found that this one really stands out. The next one is a very different example, and it's from outside an employer world. It's a brand campaign from Bodyform. So Bodyform is a manufacturer of personal care products for women, so mostly menstrual and menopause products. And I'd like to put this in perspective. So it's worth mentioning that women's health gap is a global issue. It has been brought up in Davos this year as a top economic priority. So it could potentially boost the global economy by $1 trillion annually by 2040. So that's a huge number. And it's also a hard fact that women's health has been under-researched and underfunded, and women have been consistently underrepresented in clinical trials, which results in the differences in health outcomes between men and women. So women live longer, but spend more time in poor health. And what this means for women in everyday lives is that women are more likely to experience chronic pain, but are less likely to be prescribed painkillers. And also open discussion of the issues and experiences that are familiar to every woman, or the problems that women go through at different stages of their lives. So these things have just long been a taboo subject. And this campaign is an incredibly brave take on this issue. So it's very honest, it's very raw, it shows and highlights women's experiences in all their complexity. And also the way it's been brought to life it's an absolutely stunning piece of filmmaking. So in my personal opinion, this is one of the greatest campaigns of all times. So it should be in some sort of a hall of fame somewhere, if it's not already. So if you do one thing after this webinar, I do suggest that you try and follow the link and watch the film on YouTube. But I do warn you that it is very emotional, and we had some people saying, why didn't you tell me? So I'm telling you, it is emotional, but it's worth it. So next one is Dove, so another consumer brand that's been highlighting stereotypes that affect women's confidence and questions beauty conventions that undermine human dignity. So Dove has launched the For Real Beauty campaign 20 years ago. And when I thought about it, it made me slightly scared, because I do remember when it was actually launched. And I also remember that at the time, there was quite a lot of skepticism in the industry, even among industry professionals. And I remember very vividly someone saying that women don't want to see reality, they want to see a dream, because a dream is aspirational, because it's unattainable, it's aspirational. I'm not joking, like this is a true story. It's really actually heartwarming to see that Dove has been like very consistent. They have stuck with this campaign for 20 years, and they have been remarkably consistent with their core message. That what really matters is authenticity, and they have consistently challenged and exposed artificial beauty standards that are imposed on women. And also what's interesting is that they use the format of social experiments to demonstrate, not just say that, which made the message even more powerful. So the insight behind this latest iteration of the campaign by Dove in the United States was that most parents underestimate how harmful toxic beauty advice can be on social media. So the campaign shows the campaign video shows an experiment. They invited pairs of moms and daughters, and with a clever use of tech, they got moms to realize just how widespread and normalized toxic beauty advice is, and how every day their daughters hear something that undermines their confidence. But also, in addition to raising awareness of this issue, Dove Self-Esteem Project has developed tools for parents to help them have open conversations with their girls and help them detoxify their social media feed. So, this is great because it gets beneath the surface of the issue and it gets people to really face the reality. And also, another key takeaway from this is that it's really important to have the dialogue between parents and their girls and to keep talking to each other. So, which is, I think, is true of the issues that women face in the workplace as well. So we need to keep talking. And it's also worth mentioning that Dove brand success did not just happen. So it's based on years of research. It employed a host of methods to understand the issues that women face and how that relates to Dove products. And also, customer research was supplemented with expert guidance. So, for example, this Dove Self-Esteem Project has a global advisory board with 11 experts who are on that board. So the next two examples are different to the previous, the brand examples that I've just shared. And this example from a CPB London, a creative agency, is a communications campaign that was launched on the International Women's Day in London. And it highlights the double standards applied to women and men through the use of biased language. And sadly, very often the same behavior is labeled differently depending on who is displaying it, men or women. And also, sadly, it's quite universal, so it's not specific to the English language. And so this campaign provided examples and the toolkit for international toolkit in other languages for companies to use. So this is a great example of a powerful idea and a flexible execution that can be applied on a large or small scale, so across different mediums. So we could see it, for example, as an outdoor campaign, but also as an internal communications campaign. So this is really flexible. This could work in different places. And the final example that I'd like to talk about is Transport for London's campaign against sexual harassment on public transport. Now, those of us in London must be very familiar with it because it's been running for a couple of years and it was really very visible on the underground. And what is remarkable about this campaign is that it's a very good example of communications planning that puts behavior change theory in practice. So the first stage of the campaign was aimed to build awareness and understanding of the issue. So naming the problem is the first step to solving a problem. And then it follows through with a call to action. So in the first stage, the campaign broke down harassment, which might seem quite an abstract and big term, so they broke it down into very specific behaviors. So what can harassment look like? It can be verbal, non-verbal, physical, and digital. And in the second stage of the campaign, they gave guidance on what to do. So for anyone who is affected by or is witnessing an incident. And as we can see, this campaign engages multiple audiences and with different communication goals. So to prevent inappropriate behavior, to protect and support victims, and to enable bystanders to become active allies. And also, arguably, this campaign had a much bigger effect beyond its immediate objective of tackling harassment on public transport. Because with its broad reach, it probably made a lasting impact on society, hopefully. Just conveying like what's not appropriate on public transport is also not appropriate anywhere, in any public space, in the streets, in a bar, in the workplace. So this is the last example of among the ones that we wanted to share with you, and we hope that it gave you some food for thought, and we hope that you find these examples as interesting and inspiring as we did. So our next, the last section that we want to conclude with is bringing together everything that we've learned from the research that we've done and also from the examples that we've looked at. And we've summed them up into guiding principles for impactful campaigns that will help develop powerful campaign ideas and communications with lasting impact. So these are the 5 principles are issue-driven, ownable, action-oriented, authentic storytelling, and the power of language. And we'll go through them one by one. But before we do, it's worth mentioning that we see them as ingredients for an impactful campaign that can work together as a package, but also individually. So for each principle, we'll offer some questions to consider. So if there are some small tweaks that you could apply to what you are already doing, we hope that these principles can help make it more effective. So the first principle is issue-driven. And the question that we'd like you to ask when thinking about the next campaign is, what is an issue that you can confidently and credibly take a stand on? So, for example, is there an industry-specific gender issue that you could bring attention to? So is there an underrepresentation of women in some functions or roles or positions more so than in similar industries? Or are there some systemic imbalances that need to be addressed? And is there any insight about gender inequity in this field that you could use as a springboard? Is there any room for improvement in the employee experience? So are there any barriers that hold women back? Or also conversely, you could think of what are you doing that works really well that you could share with other organizations so that they could learn from it in trying to solve this issue. And also looking beyond the industry, thinking about the bigger societal issues. So is there a bigger societal issue affecting women that you could be talking about and that you could help with?
I think Lego was a great example of this area around ownable, around the guiding principles. And, you know, we all know that when we build out any type of brand campaign, it's got to feel uniquely ownable and yours and really seamlessly align with your brand identity and your values. And this is where I think sometimes people around it comes to kind of International Women's Day or you know, Women's History Month don't always remember that. And I think this is, you know, we've got to create content and messaging that stands out without a doubt, but it has to reflect the brand values, the voice and the visual style, and it has to feel like it feels part of your organization. And in doing that, it will become memorable for the right reasons. And I think sometimes a lot of organisations, when they're thinking about their International Women's Day, get remembered for the wrong reasons. And I think the examples that Anastasia took us through are some really good examples of, we'll talk about authenticity later, but some really good examples of where a brand's owned it and stuck with it for many years as well. And it definitely creates that stronger connection with your audience.
So action-oriented is another thing we've pretty much talked about throughout the whole webinar today. And one thing we'd really like to encourage everyone is to think bigger, because it's not just about the International Women's Day. Yeah? So the impact that a campaign can make longer term, if really well thought through, can really be huge. So thinking about, like, does the campaign inspire action, and thinking about the examples that we've shared, are we giving people tools to actually change their behaviors or do something differently? And does the campaign have the capacity to engage the whole industry, or are we engaging allies? And does it have this, like, PRable quality? So all these considerations would really help to come up with ideas that have longevity and make a lasting impact.
And then obviously authentic storytelling. Now, I can't imagine that you haven't heard this phrase come out from one of us whilst talking to you in a meeting before, but that authenticity really is really important when it comes to this, and recognizing the power of the stories that we share and then the impact that they can have. And, you know, when we're talking about authenticity and how that resonates with your audience, creates the trust and the connections. And it's got to, Anastasia talked earlier on about going beyond that surface level, and how women really want to understand what's the real experiences that are going to be relevant and relatable and inspiring. And it's not just about what looks like a well-framed photo shoot or a well-placed campaign. By bringing that authentic real story, it's going to make a real lasting impression and make you stronger, make you more relatable. And I think especially in organisations in unique industries where perhaps women are not as prevalent in the organisation, it gives them an understanding of where and how they could fit and really build into that brand narrative.
And the final consideration is about the language that we use, and it is as important as the subject we talk about. And of course, like, the starting point is the clarity of what is the core message that we want to deliver. But when crafting that message, we really need to be intentional with the choice of words and avoid platitudes and buzzwords, because that really helps to deliver the message. And as we have seen, for example, in the TfL's campaign, being specific when talking about the problem is that we want to bring attention to really helps the audiences understand it and connect with the message better. And language has really the power to add clarity and to shape the minds and behaviors. But we also need to consider that we're being genuinely inclusive, and language can be this, like, powerful, subtle, but really powerful signifier that we truly understand and acknowledge and respect the different experiences and the needs of women from diverse backgrounds. And this concludes what we wanted to share with you. And I believe we've got some time for questions still.
A couple of minutes for questions if anyone has any. If there isn't any questions that come up now, then, you know, we will share the deck afterwards and the recording of the webinar. But, you know, definitely reach out to your account leads, and you know, we can explore this more with you. We can bring it to life within the organisation if that helps as well. But we hope that you have found it really useful, that there's been some takeaways that you can think about when you're thinking about gender equity and you know, future campaigns. But it's been an absolute pleasure pulling this together and working on it, and I'm hoping it's been useful for yourselves as well.
Questions?
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone for joining.